Hey everyone, before we start off this new episode of the Domestique Cycling Podcast, I would like to invite you to the Domestique Social Ride. What is Domestique Social Ride? Well, it's a social ride that takes place on August 20th in Belgium. If you'd like to attend, you can find the pre-registration form in the description below. We will ride 80 kilometers around the stunning scenery of the Flemish Ardennes, the scenery of the Ronde van Vlaanderen. So if you want to be there, go fill in the form and we'll see you there. Now, enjoy this latest episode of the Domestique Cycling Podcast. Will Wout van Aert win a stage at this Tour de France?
No.
Will the motorbike incident on Juplin decide the overall GC?
I hope not.
Will Caleb Ewan ride another Tour de France for Lotto Destiny?
No.
Will a GC guy win the KOM classification?
Yes.
I've got the spots, the sickness. There's the twins in my brain.
10 seconds. That's all that separates Jonas, Vingegaard and Tadej Pogacar after 15 stages of La Grande Boucle. These two gladiators are so closely matched, it will come down to the wire. The time trial lies ahead of us, as does Col de la Loze, so there's still room to make differences on the road. A PSA before we start off this episode proper. In the past week, we have seen a few crashes and incidents caused by over-enthusiastic fans. If you go watch cycling on the side of the road, do not stand on the road surface. You're effectively standing on a racing circuit, endangering yourself and the racers. Also, put your phone away. Enjoy the moment. Enjoy the racing. Those memories will be much better than the photo you would have taken. Well, that's my rant done. As the first time I host a Domestique podcast, I'm joined by one of the OGs who's back from vacation. Hey, Yves, welcome back.
Hi, Bram. Glad to be back here and to talk about cycling again.
Where did you stay during your vacation?
I went to the Roquebrune-sur-Argens. That's pretty close to the Côte d'Azur, but not the expensive prices of the Côte d'Azur. So we were half an hour away from Saint-Tropez. Very nice, hot. But this week it will even be hotter. I think around 40 degrees or a little bit less. So yeah, but it's in the south of Europe. It's very hot everywhere. So
yeah, I could tell you that you have a little bit of a tan. Did you
Yeah,
get to see the racing in the past 10 days?
Yeah, I try to look to the race profiles in the morning to see what was on the menu for the riders, and then I decided from where I would start watching, and before that just following it on Domestique Live to know what's happened before.
A very good place to follow live racing.
It's the best.
Well, since we skipped the podcast on the previous rest day, I suggest we run through the old stages real quickly and just mention the results or if there's any notable stuff. The last stage we recapped was stage 6 to Couderay Basque, which was won by Pogacar. So stage 7 was a stage to Bordeaux, where we had our expected bunch sprint won by Jasper Philipsen. But I think this stage will mainly be remembered for what could potentially have been stage win number 35 for Mark Cavendish. He got really close to it, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. He was quite badly positioned. When we looked at the cameras, he wasn't really in sight, but then he shot to the front and took a bike length or even more advantage on Philipsen. But Philipsen came back so strong and proved he is the strongest sprinter in this Tour de France. But it was heartbreak for Cavendish, certainly after what happens the next day, I think.
Yeah. There was that small mechanical issue for Cavendish that he couldn't keep his gear on the 11. Do you think that caused him to lose that stage, or would have Philipsen still have come over?
I doubt it, because the way Philipsen played that sprint, he used his head. He was very smart to not open up the sprint too soon, because if I recall correctly, Van der Poel faded a little bit too early to launch it. So Philipsen, dared to wait and go into the draft of Cavendish. And if you saw the speed difference between Mark and Jasper, it wouldn't have made a difference, in my opinion.
There was again talk about a possible relegation for Philipsen after he moved into the line of Biniam Girmay after moving into the slipstream of Mark Cavendish. What did you think of that move?
It's all very difficult. Like, you have to sprint in a straight line, and that are the rules. He made a slight deviation towards Girmay. But is it enough for a relegation? I don't know. It's always very difficult because when do you relegate? Do you see normally relegates if there is a big crash or if your name is Nasser Bouhanni or Sagan or Cavendish with the head bumps a couple of years ago. But it's so difficult. Should he be relegated? Maybe yes, to show to the whole peloton that there doesn't need to be a crash to receive a relegation, but it's very difficult for me.
Of course, there is him having had a couple of questionable moves in the first couple sprints, that maybe there's a bigger focus on him now because he also got called dangerous before.
Was that the sprint that Van der Poel got a fine for?
No, I think that was earlier. That was his second stage win.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, and like we see, Alpecin has a little bit of a bad name, if we can call it like that, in this year's tour. With Philipsen, his first 2 stage wins, some complaints, but I think it was Cavendish who complained in the stage 7 for the stage 7 results. But should Cavendish do that? Because Cavendish wasn't really hampered for it. He just wanted that stage win. But Cavendish shouldn't win his record victory around the table.
No,
he should win it fair
agree.
and square.
I agree. All right, on to stage 8, which was the stage won by Mats Pedersen. He finished off some pretty amazing teamwork by Lidl Trek, and is so far the only sprinter to have beaten Jasper Philipsen on the line at this tour. His sprint was really impressive, right?
Yeah, if I recall correctly, in my domestic picks, I said it would be for Mathieu van der Poel, because it was quite a tough finish, and it was actually perfect for Mathieu. But the confidence and belief in Philipsen was so big within the Alpecin team that they decided to go for it. It was good for the morale, and it was good for the points jersey. And you saw Philipsen was very motivated because he knew Mathieu would domestique for him on a finish that normally suits a top Van der Poel. So he wanted to give Mathieu that win. But you saw in a very strong and hard sprint with a little drag uphill that Pedersen is one of a kind who can make his effort really long without fading away. And Philipsen couldn't beat him.
The sprint was also the one where Laporte boxed in his own leader, Wout van Aert. What went wrong there?
I have no clue. In our group chat with Dieter, if I recall correctly, he defended Laporte a little bit because Laporte already did a lot of work before that lead out. And when we look at that race profile, the last part is quite tough. It's up and down the whole time. And I just think the communication wasn't perfect, and Laporte should have mentioned I'm dead. He had to go away from Van Aert a little bit sooner, because now he bogged down. Yeah, and he boxed in Van Aert because of it.
Exactly. He stayed sort of where he was on the road instead of normally you swing out. But that didn't happen.
If he swings out 2 seconds earlier before he fades, then Wout has a real chance to get that stage win. And now he had probably the strongest sprint of them all, because from where he came and at the finish he came third, but his speed was a lot higher than a Pedersen and a Philipsen, who opened up earlier, of course. But I think Van Aert had a very good chance to take the stage win in Limoges.
I agree. Earlier in the day, Mark Cavendish had to abandon after a crash, which caused a fracture to his collarbone. Do you think he'll take Vinokurov up on his offer for an extra year?
I hope so. But it's very difficult when you have in your mind in Bilbao 2 weeks ago, this is my last Tour de France. I'm not coming here again. I'm enjoying every stage of it, even uphill. We saw him enjoy himself. And now it's such a sad way to end his Tour de France. Will he come back? I hope, and I think the whole cycling world hopes he come back. But will he? It will all depend on Cavendish himself. Is he mentally fresh enough to go for that other extra year? Is he eager enough to go for it? What about his family, his wife, his kids? Do they already have plans after this year? I don't know. But I sincerely hope he goes for another year.
I personally don't think he will. I don't think he cares that much about the record, because that's really what people want to see him come back, right? To have the record only on his name. He's currently the record holder, just has to share it with a pretty good person to share records with, in my opinion.
But doesn't he care?
I think he cares a little, but the career he's had, and I think he's also quite big of a family guy. Like every time you see him with his family, they're very close. I think he'll want to retire and say, well, I did all I could. It is what it is.
But like the fact Astana brought in Renshaw and etc. And I heard an interview from Renshaw saying Cavendish Mark is a little bit nervous when there is a real sprint finish coming up in this year Tour de France. It's different than it was other years. So he feels there is pressure and he feels that special stage win is there. And we all know Cavendish as a guy who performs very strong and who loves to have a good palmarès, if I can say so. So that one win, one more year, and just retire. If he wins stage 1 in Tour de France, retire.
Maybe just a contract till the end of the tour, and then done.
Yeah. Or I don't know. I think Vinokurov is praying Cavendish goes for another year.
Definitely. I hope to see it.
Yeah, me too.
All right, we're going to stage 9, Puy de Dôme Day. The stage was won by Michael Woods from the break. Behind him, we saw some fireworks between Pogacar and Vingegaard. Did Puy de Dôme deliver on its mythical status?
Well, for me it did, because every GC stage we saw is fireworks, and it was Puy de Dôme. It is mythical, but still the riders make it mythical. It can be a mythical climb, but the riders are just sitting there and waiting. Then it's not mythical for me, if I can say so. But how the Tadej and Jonas of this world rode up that climb, it was phenomenal. Even the fight in the breakaway, I think Woods was 2 minutes behind Jorgensen at one point at the start of the climb. But Puy de Dôme didn't lie, the strongest one.
Yeah, for sure. It was quite a big heartbreak for Jorgensen, who really looked strong, and just he couldn't do more. Like seeing Woods like creep up on him, and like you knew he was gonna catch him, but it's like disaster waiting to happen for Jorgensen.
Jorgensen was pacing himself the best he could. He knew the moment he went up solo, I have to go up there, just looking at his power meter and pray no one comes back.
Yeah, exactly.
The way Woods climbed Puy de Dôme was mighty impressive, in my opinion. That's probably one of the strongest performances of Woods I ever saw from him. Even
I think it's a climb that suits him really well. The steep gradients, that's really Woods' territory. But then Jorgensen to finish 4th after all that is just so sad.
Well, a special mention for Mohoric though on
Of course.
I don't know where he get that legs from, but on a finish like Puy de Dôme, he's a guy over 70 kilos, I assume.
I think so.
To finish behind the Woods de la Tour and in front of a Berthet, Paulus, and a Lutsenko. Impressive.
Definitely. Vingegaard lost about 8 seconds in the last 500 meters to Pogacar. All the other GC riders lost about a minute in that long sprint. These two are really something else compared to the rest of the GC, right?
Yeah, it's a 1v1. It's Pogacar against Jonas. The others are very strong. I don't want to minimize their efforts, but Tadej and Jonas aren't normal humans. They are on the level of a Remco and maybe a Roglic, and that's it. That's the top of pro cycling, I think, and we are witnessing it in this year's Tour de France.
Yeah, I agree. I think out of all the people who can win Grand Tours these days, it's got to be those four. There are very few who can compete with them. We saw in the Giro that Thomas can put up a good fight.
Yeah.
But I think in this tour, it's just those two, and all the rest is on 5 minutes by the recording of this episode.
Yeah, when we look at I think the 10th in the GC at this point is already 15 minutes behind on Vingegaard.
Yeah,
So,
I don't remember the last time that happened at the second rest day. That the
and
gaps are just so huge.
And still a tough week coming up, so
exactly
20 plus minutes incoming.
For sure. Well, stage 10 was a huge breakaway day with a win for Pello Bilbao in the sprint against Zimmerman, O'Connor, Nylund, and Chavez. The break formation took ages on a very hilly terrain. It was a very hard start of the stage. That means a very hard day for some of the sprinters. Jakobsen and Ewan were really in trouble. Both of them finished the stage, but the writing was kind of on the wall for the days to come, right?
Yeah, I think Jakobsen crashed a couple of days before that stage, and Jakobsen isn't known as the sprinter who can climb very well because he's a little bit heavier. He's one of the heavier sprinters as well. In comparison to Ewan, who is a sprinter as well, but who's quite lightweight. His weight isn't that high. He's not that heavy. But it seems like Ewan struggles even more on that mountainous terrain, and that's, I don't know why, but it surprises me that Ewan climbs so bad. He's climbing better than I am. I'm sure of that, but I don't know.
Like, is it a mental thing?
Well, there are some things in the media after the abandon of Ewan, that the atmosphere in the team wasn't good anymore, etc., etc., and that Ewan and his management want the team around him and in full support of him. But like we said in the preview, this wasn't a smart idea in this year's Tour de France. This year's Tour de France is too hard to dedicate a full team minus Van Hils and Inkhorn maybe to a sprinter. And now they have lost their sprinter, the stage after this, if I recall correctly.
There's two more stages, but
yeah. Two more stages, but yeah, I don't know what's about Ewan. He has a very bad year. Last year was quite rubbish as well. Is it the team? Is it? Yeah, I don't know. What's your opinion about that?
I think it's a mental issue. Also related with the case of Alan Davis being taken out of the Tour de France team, which is kind of, I'm guessing, a very close DS to him, both of them being Australian. Alan Davis also was a sprinter, so I don't think that will have benefited Caleb Ewan's mental level. I just don't think he was ready for this tour, to be honest. But I also don't think that Lotto Destiny had any alternatives to bring a different squad to this tour, if I'm honest.
Well, yeah, the team remains quite. Yeah, I'm not a fan of Lotto Destiny, but when you look at their squad depth, it's not strong enough, and it's a pro team worthy selection they have. It's not World Tour anymore, and I know when Dieter listens to this, he'll kill me, but it's just not enough. The team was so big, or was bigger 5, 6, 7 years ago, and now it's sad to see Belgian team.
Yeah. Of course, we do have to judge them as a pro Conti team now, not a World Tour team. But even then, if you build a team around one rider like this and they're not mentally or physically ready, I think in the first couple of stages he showed that he was physically ready, but after that it was just gone. I don't think he crashed. It was just gone.
He was ill, if I recall correctly, after that or during that first rest day. But Lotto Destiny is very lucky they have Maxim van Hils in the Tour de France selection. Without him, it would even be worse.
Definitely. We saw both of them, so both Ewan and Jakobsen tried to sprint on stage 11, but they finished 15th and 16th. It was clear that they were both pretty dead. Jasper Philipsen won that stage in a pretty dominant fashion without a lead out of Van der Poel. Is it right to call Philipsen the fastest sprinter in the world now?
Yeah, he's the strongest of them all. I don't even know who comes close to him at this point with the level they're having now. But and the way he copes with the mountains as well. This stage 11, like you just said, Ewan 15th, Jakobsen 16th. Certainly because they have tired legs. And then you see a Philipsen just dominate a Groenewegen who had a perfect lead out from Mesgej, and just he had a cold when Jasper passed. Yeah,
I do have to say Groenewegen has been very impressive this Tour de France as a climber. He's surprising me a lot with his climbing ability.
I recall I laughed with him last year, I think, when he went to the Dauphiné or Paris-Nice and wasn't even able to survive a sort of Camelberg, some small hills. And I was just laughing that Jaco was around Groenewegen with 6 riders to try to pull him back then. So he was climbing very bad last year, but indeed, I think he finished every time in the Philipsen group this year, or a little bit behind, but he's climbing very strong.
Right. Well, on to stage 12, which was another win for Cofidis. Their second win in this tour after winning with Lafay on stage 2. I already apologized about us skipping Cofidis in our tour preview, but I think we might have to do it again. They've proven us very wrong and won 2 stages after not winning a single one for 15 years. That's impressive, right?
Well, I didn't expect it, to be honest. We were a little bit rude in the Tour de France preview, but actually their team is pretty strong. And Ion Izagirre is a quality rider. And he proved that in stage 12, where he just was the strongest and no one could follow him or stay with him. With Lafay in the second stage or third stage, you already discussed that probably, but was quite very strong. But you see now Lafay is fading a little bit because of the fatigue that kicks in, and now it's Guillaume Martin time.
Definitely. We also saw a very strong Bourgodeau. He's having a really strong Tour de France so far. I did not see that coming. Did you?
Yeah, it's a pity he's not in my fantasy team because he would have given me a lot of points. But he's very strong and he's climbing quite strong. We already witnessed that in Paris-Nice or Dauphiné, the stage he finished second behind Zimmermann in that close battle. But he's one of the strongest performing Frenchmen in this year's Tour de France at this point.
Yeah, I definitely think he's one to watch out for. He's only 24, and he's just I just didn't think of him, to be honest. I really underrated him. But he's done some amazing results so far.
We saw in that stage a rock Mathieu van der Poel, where he attacked pretty soon and went solo for a bit, but then the chasing group got back and he tried to follow Ion Izagirre's attack, but then Mathieu went completely into the red and just faded away once again. And to be honest, I don't know what's wrong with or if there is something wrong with Van der Poel. I don't know, but it's quite. I expected more. I have to be honest.
Yeah, I'm also a little bit confused about Van der Poel's tactics in this Tour de France. This is not really a stage that would have like worked for him as a like. I think this stage was too hard for him.
Yeah, it was on the edge of. Yeah, normally it was too hard, but yeah, Van der Poel in top shape. I hoped. I think I picked him in domestic picks that day as well, or I had a bet on him. I don't know, but it was hard, and I knew it would be hard. But I expected it, certainly after the interviews before the Tour de France, a very strong Van der Poel. And for me, personally, and the individual of Mathieu van der Poel, he didn't perform. He performed very strong for the team as a lead-out man, but purely his own performances are a little bit meh for me in this year's tour.
Yeah, I kind of joked about it in our group chat as well when we were talking about like the values of the riders for Wheeler to Manager with Van der Poel costing about 9 million. 9 million for a lead-out guy is very expensive, and I don't think he's gonna return a lot of points for those who bought him. But yeah, I'm kind of surprised and a little bit disappointed not to see him fight more wins.
He's going into stages that you think, why he's in the break? Like yesterday, he was in the break again. Mm-hmm. And then you ask why, because that finish is way too hard. He isn't the Wout van Aert, and he knows he isn't Van Aert. There's only one Van Aert. But I get the feeling he's doing what Alaphilippe did 2 years ago, and just uses Tour de France as an extra altitude camp.
That's an option. There was also that really weird attack. It was not really attack, where he and Van Aert went from the peloton up the road for like, I don't know, 10-15 minutes. They just bombed it down a descent, suddenly found themselves about a minute in front of the peloton and were riding. And what's that about? Like, why do that? It doesn't go anywhere.
I really don't know what he's doing. He was ill a little bit as well, but it's weird to see him alright like this. And I hope to see him in the rainbow jersey then, if he's not delivering in the Tour de France.
An option. I think he's definitely working towards that. It's also what he's been saying in interviews. All right. Then we go to stage 13, which takes us into the Alps to Grand Colombier. Again, it was a winner from the breakaway. Michał Kwiatkowski rode a stunning ascent of Grand Colombier. He's often underrated as a rider, but that stage was one of those days where he shows his real power and class as a rider. Second place went to Maxim van Gils. Can we expect more good things from Van Gils in this tour?
Well, probably, but I read an article today that he had a crash on the rest day today. He doesn't have injuries, but it isn't beneficial for the last week. When you hit the deck, you will always feel a little bit. But if he reaches the level he had in stage 13, and he brings that to the third week, he will be close to a stage win if the GC teams give breaks freedom, of course.
Yeah, of course, this third week is usually a little bit more difficult to control, so we see more break wins in the third week usually.
But I don't know. We're gonna talk about it later probably, but bonification seconds will be important in this year's Tour de France. Everybody says Jonas is gonna obliterate Pogacar on the Col de la Loze, but I don't believe it.
Well, some people in the Domestique team definitely believe that. I don't know. Pogacar did an all-out attack in the last 500 meters again. kind of typical Pogacar by now, to open a small gap back to Vingegaard. He gained 4 seconds there, plus 3 seconds of bonifications. So you don't think bonifications will decide this tour, or what's your take on that?
It will not decide it, but I think UAE will go for it in certain stages to get the bonification on some sort of climb or at the finish, because they know Pogacar is more explosive than Vingegaard. Of course, the moto incident where Vingegaard surprised Pogacar then at that sprint. But normally, if they sprint 10 times, 9.5 times, Pogacar comes out on top. But he should have gone earlier in that stage. Because if I recall correctly, the UAE was pacing the whole day to get the stage win. And they weren't really closing in. Groschardt and etc. couldn't really close the gap anymore on Kwiatkowski. But when you saw that Pogacar attack then with 500 to go, he had quite a bit left in the legs. And I had the feeling at the finish, Vingegaard was even breaking a little bit more. So if he maybe attacked at 1K or 800 meters to go, it would maybe he didn't have 10 seconds. I don't know that, of course. I don't have the legs, or I didn't feel the legs of Pogacar. But
go ahead.
Yeah, he finished 50 seconds from Kwiatkowski and 3 seconds away from the second place. So it would be ideal if he just could get Van Hils between himself and Jonas, but he wasn't able to. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think in those 500 meters, he took out a minute from Kwiatkowski. Yeah. So I mean, that's, well, just his explosiveness is insane. But the fact that Vingegaard limits his losses in those efforts, because we always think that Vingegaard is like not explosive at all. But the fact that he can stay that close to Pogacar, even in those very explosive efforts, kind of shows like these two are, like, sure, they have their slight differences in their talents, but it's really not much.
Jonas is less explosive than Pogacar, but when we look at the attacks that they did, in the initial part of the attack, Vingegaard is able to stick to the wheel of Pogacar. So in the initial kick, the explosive part of the attack, he's able to follow him. But then I think it's after 10 seconds that he's fading a little bit, he has to sit. And Pogacar has that extra kick to run on his pedals for an extra 5 or 10 seconds. And that gives him a 4 or 5 seconds advantage. But when they go both in the saddle, they are equal. Mm-hmm. The gap remains the same. So it's just Pogacar is more explosive, but I have a feeling he can make the duration of his explosive attack a little bit longer than Jonas can.
Yeah, definitely think so as well. But if you would compare Vingegaard to any other GC rider, Jonas is more explosive than any of them as well.
He showed that in Bos in the Izulia race in the Basque Country, where he obliterated the opposition. Was it that race? I don't know anymore. But he showed he was very explosive as well. But when he wanted to attack, he went and nobody could follow him. And you can only do that because you are explosive. Otherwise, you aren't able to create that gap.
Mm-hmm. This stage was also the one where Caleb Ewan abandoned after 2 of his teammates stood still for about 10 minutes to try and get him to the line. I know we talked a little bit about it before, but what's your take on what comes next for Caleb Ewan? Is it at Lotto Destiny? Is it at another team? Because clearly the team atmosphere there is rotten.
First of all, if I would have been Frison and or the Beast who waited on him, I would be fuming. They stayed with him the stage before that and the stage before that to get him at the finish within the time limit. It's hard days for them as well to pace a dead sprinter in their draft to the line. Does he have a future within Lotto Destiny? No, certainly not after the interviews we saw from team members and his companions on the road. And De Beust, Frison aren't happy about him neither. And once your own teammates aren't happy anymore about you, then you should move on.
Yeah, I thought it was really weird that all this is being played out in the press, in the media. Like it's been a long time. Well, the only time I've seen it before is with a Bennett and a Lefebvre, and that's just Lefebvre's style. Always has been to throw stuff into the press, but you don't ever see that from other teams, and I'm very confused why they're doing it this way.
I have a feeling there's a lot happening behind the scenes between the Caleb management and the Lotto Destiny management.
Yeah,
there
possibly.
is more happening than we see in the media, but it's very weird that they are fighting it out in front of everyone.
All right. Well, stage 14 is the one to Jouplan with the descent to Morzine. Won by a surprising name, I think, Carlos Rodriguez. Sort of the third dog that runs off with the bone, as we have a saying. Yeah, we had that, a lot of incidents with fans along the road, as well as the motorbikes. Is that problem becoming bigger than it used to be?
The motors, etc., are a problem and are already a problem for several months, years. When we go and watch the classic races here in Belgium, the amount of motorcycles that are riding around the peloton is insane. That's not needed, and certainly in that stage to Morzine, when there are fans around the riders, very close to the riders, those motorcycles don't have to be there. The fans are acting a little bit different as well, but they aren't to be blamed for that incident. It was purely the motorcyclist who shouldn't be there.
No, of course, I do agree with that. But I also do think that there's an issue with some of the fans that are getting, first of all, too close, but that's something we've always seen. But some of them are also just getting a little bit rude, showing off body parts on TV that nobody needs to see, or even through their actions. I heard Yves Lampaert say that he was drinking from his bidon on the Jouplan, and a fan tried to take it out of his hands while he was drinking it. Don't do that. Like, if you're doing those things, you're not a fan of cycling.
And I have a huge problem with fans who just run besides the cyclist as well. That's completely unnecessary. You make a fool of yourself, and you aren't enjoying the races more than when you stay put on your place and cheer for every rider, the first who passes, but as well the last one who passes. You don't have to run besides a cyclist and create a sort of situation where or a rider can't attack, or you stumble foolishly around your own feet and you make a rider crash. You don't have to do it, and you're not popular at all. If the police sees that, they just have to pull that guys from the road, and I don't know what, but
I 100% agree with you.
It's a disgrace that I never understood it, and I will never understand it.
All right, back to the actual stage. With Rodriguez being a stage winner, do you think that Ineos's Tour de France is like a success because they have 2 stage wins now?
It has everything to be a success. They have 2 stage wins, and they are on the top spot to fight for the last podium spot in Paris. I think it's even better than they predicted before the start of the Tour de France. I recall when we did the Ineos preview that we really didn't know what they were gonna do. A GC Pitcock, where Thomas believed in, but then in Carlos Rodriguez, who has the potential for it, but was quite mediocre this season. A Bernal who came back to a Grand Tour again, a Dani Martinez, a lot of big names, but we didn't know how they would perform. And Carlos Rodriguez proves he's the strongest of them, and he climbs very strong. He's the best behind the first two.
Mm-hmm.
But Carlos wouldn't have won that stage without the motors.
No, I do agree with that. There was a little bit of a tactical play going on between our two, main contenders, and then he sort of profited from that.
We can't work with ifs, but if that motorcycle wasn't there, Pogacar would have get the attack till the bony sprint and then would have dived down in the descent because he would have maybe a 4 or 5 seconds gap.
Mm-hmm.
And then even if Vingegaard closes in back before the line, Pogacar probably wins that sprint, so he gets that extra bonifications again, and he's in yellow as well. So will it change the outcome of Tour de France? I don't think so. But a Pogacar in yellow or a Vingegaard in yellow is a completely different thing.
That's true. The stage was also the one with a very massive crash at the start of the stage, where we had to say goodbye to quite a few names. Some of them tried to ride on, but I think we had 7 DNFs in one stage. It's been a long time since I've seen that in one stage. And I think the biggest name there is going to be Louis Meintjes, who, I think he looked really strong. He's always one of those guys who can just cling on. And as well as, of course, Romain Bardet, who did look to be suffering the past couple of days already. But of course, having him out of the race is a real shame.
Yeah, it's a pity. The crash was very big. I don't know what was the cause of it anymore, actually.
A slippery road, like a corner. One person braked. I think Van Gils went down first by bumping into the wheels, and basically took over 30 people with him.
Yeah, that's it's a pity. But the stage after it was worse for me.
Well, let's start talking about that stage. So this is stage 2, Mont Blanc. Let's maybe start talking about that stage, that crash straight away, where you have
stupid spectator.
Where you have an idiot, I'll use that word, who takes out Sepp Kuss by having his phone over the road and basically punching Sepp Kuss in the ribs. That takes out the front of the peloton, and Nathan van Hooijdonk hits the deck really hard. Somehow is able to finish the stage. Do you expect that someone like Van Hooijdonk will be able to get going again on Tuesday?
He will start, but the way he crawled into the team car after the stage didn't look promising. He doesn't have fractures, but his wounds and etc. will ask a lot of energy from his body. Certainly already after 2 tough Tour de France weeks, the body needs every inch of it to recover for the muscles, and now it needs to put some energy into healing the wounds. So he will be there, but reaching Paris will be difficult. I don't know how this rest day will go for him, if he can recover enough. But we will not see the Van Hooijdonk anymore we saw the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think he looked really strong before. Like pulling onto, was it Tourmalet where he was still pulling? Like there was a couple mountains where just I don't expect Van Hooijdonk to even be in this peloton anymore, and he's still setting pace. But it's quite extraordinary that both the UAE and Jumbo team this far into the tour still have complete teams and kind of were saved from crashes until now. I don't think they had any crashes between them until, well, stage 13 or stage 14, where Kelderman went down as well in that big pileup.
Trentin already was in a crash as well, but besides Trentin, you're right. They are actually quite safe on the roads for now. They have the full roster, full squad, no illnesses, all on their 100% shape. So yeah, it's quite nice to see that the two protagonist teams are in full force, and it's actually very nice to see as well when there is only 1.5 climb in the stage with the uphill finish. It's UAE who controls, because they know Pogacar is a little bit more explosive and can go for a bonification spread seconds. And when it's a very tough stage with over 4,000 altitude meters, then it's Jumbo-Visma who tries to put in as much as possible kilojoules into the legs, because they think that benefits Vingegaard more than it benefits Pogacar. So that's quite nice to see that team dynamics. Jonas and Tadej aren't really scared to lose, but we already saw the last two stages that poker is creeping into their minds. But the teams just go all out, and if the team plan is to ride a whole day and make everyone suffer, they do it, and it's very nice to see. Kudos to Laporte in that stage we're talking about now, the Mont Blanc stage. Was it the Mont Blanc stage?
Yeah, he pulled for like more than an hour, because of course he had to take over the shift from Van Hooijdonk. But what that crash also did cause was that the break had fighted for the win, because there was a 35 rider break up the road, and because of that, I think the peloton was still around a minute back, so they were keeping it very close. Jumbo was keeping it very close. They clearly wanted to try and do something later on, as well with Van Aert in the break as satellite rider. But then suddenly the gap went out because Jumbo said, we're going to wait on all the people who crashed, and we'll take it relatively easy from there, and then we'll pick up pace again.
All because of the full on the road.
Exactly.
And by the way, when you're taking a selfie like this, you need to have to look at your phone while the riders are behind you. So you're not even seeing the peloton in real life, but only on your phone.
Yeah, that's a real shame. Like, people should prefer making actual memories instead of probably what's going to turn out as a shit picture, because...
Yep. So if you do that next time, just buy a subscription to GCN. You're able to watch the full stage on your phone, and you don't have to cause a massive crash in the bunch. Thank you. This is not promoted by GCN.
Well, you can also go to Twitter and follow Domestique Live. This might be promoted. I don't know. Self-promotion, I guess. Anyway, for the stage win, we saw the Battle of the Boats.
Did we see that?
We have Wout van Aert versus Wout Poels to fight for the stage win.
I didn't see a lot of that fight. I think I saw 2 seconds finish of Wout Poels, and then the camera shot again to the GC man.
Yeah.
Thanks for saying Wout Poels won the stage.
Yeah, basically, I do think that's a little bit of a blunder of France Télévisions, not showing him more after all the... Like, he's a great writer. He deserves better. Although everyone deserves to have their moment of glory just captured and shown on TV. We saw again some games between Tadej Pogacar and Jonas Vingegaard. Some very weird mind games as well with was it Adam Yates who set a pretty good pace. Marc Soler was on the road ahead of them, and then Pogacar just lets Adam Yates ride towards Soler. So at that moment, you can think, okay, there's going to be an attack. And you wait and you wait. Carlos Rodriguez comes back. He starts pacing. Vingegaard goes to right behind Rodriguez. Pogacar sits at the back of the group and waits and waits. And I think, how far was it to go? About a kilometer to go. He attacks. Vingegaard goes straight on his wheel. Like, no gap at all this time. Pogacar sits down and Jonas does the same. That's where we had a long discussion about this in our group chat. This is where I want to see Jonas attack.
I want to see real ciclismo.
Exactly. At that moment, Pogacar clearly just did an effort. Jonas is on his wheel, and he has the perfect moment to counter him, but he doesn't.
And Dieter mentions Vingegaard was probably close to vomiting. But we have to be honest, when we saw Jonas's face at that point, I had the feeling there was something left in that legs. Maybe there wouldn't have been a gap, but to make that statement to Pogacar from after your attack, I'm able to push an extra 5 seconds. That's more of a mental blow than he did now, than just right besides Pogacar and look at him. Pogacar is a person who doesn't care if that happens, but if someone attacks after Pogacar did an all-out attack, that's a mental blow. And now there was no mental blow, and there was a chance for Vingegaard.
I agree. I really wish that would have happened, but well, maybe.
I have no clue why he did. Maybe his legs were completely empty from Jonas. But I doubt it, because it was the first time Pogacar wasn't able to establish that 5, 6, 7 meters gap. And yeah, like Dieter and Epo mentions, it's all on Col de la Loze, that stage. But come on, the stage before, stage 15, was that Morzine? No. Where was the stage Jumbo made it really, really hard to try and get?
That was to.
That was a Carlos Rodriguez stage, no?
No, I think that was the Grand Colombier.
And was that the stage Vingegaard took time?
No, wait, it was the Morzine stage, because Vingegaard took 1 second.
And in that stage, they had probably the same idea as they will have on the stage to Col de la Loze. Put as much kilojoule into the legs to break Pogacar on the final ascent. It didn't work out in the stage to Morzine. Yes, Col de la Loze is longer and probably benefits Vingegaard more, but I want to see that. Because why is everybody so sure it suits Vingegaard more than it suits Pogacar? Because of last year, maybe, but last year isn't this year.
Yeah, I think those two have become a lot more equal in their abilities. So, for example, high altitude, heat. We haven't really seen, like, those were mentioned as Pogacar's weaknesses. We have not seen that this year. He's improved, especially in the heat. We can always say, like, oh, he looks a little bit like, oh, he looks like he's overheating, but then 1 minute later he attacks.
Yeah, I don't know what to think about Jumbo-Visma. They are quite conservative. They did one coup in the first week where they took quite a bit on time away from Pogacar. But Pogacar, I have the feeling he's growing into this Tour de France. There were 2 scenarios I had in mind before the Tour de France, or Pogacar is going to start the Tour in a very strong shape and he's going to fade towards the 3rd week. But I have the feeling it's vice versa, that he wasn't that strong in the first week and he's slightly growing toward that top shape that he needs to win this Tour de France.
Yeah, I think so as well. Personally, I think Jonas still has a little bit of an edge, but that's purely on feels and vibes. And I think it's so close between these two. It's impossible to say which one 100% will win. We launched a poll today on Twitter asking who will win, and I think it was like a 52-48 split. Nobody knows, and that's what makes this an all-time great Tour de France so far.
Yeah, and it's not only the physical aspect of the game, but also the mental game is so nice to see. Like normally you see a Pogacar always climbing with sunglasses, with glasses, but I think in the Morzine stage he took off his glasses and you just saw for the first time, if I recall correctly, I never saw that before, his killer eyes, his killer instinct.
And you can see the emotion so much better, and it just goes through like, oh my god, he's scary sometimes.
And then you saw on Twitter like Pogacar is looking tired, fatigued, his eyes are a little bit. But can you blame them after such a Tour de France that his eyes are looking a little bit tired?
I think everyone else would be dead. But I think so far it's been a really tough tour, and I think the last week will not be any different.
Do you think one of the two will fade? Will completely break like Pogacar did in that one stage last year?
No, I don't think so. I think they'll both keep going.
Stay close.
I think bonifications could play a role into it. Vingegaard has not taken bonifications except for the one on the summit of
Jouplan. Yeah.
So I think Pogacar might have a little edge there. I think it's going to be one of those tours where it's just like seconds are going to matter.
What if Vingegaard wins with 5 seconds advantage?
I think Twitter explodes. But yeah, then so be it. Racing incidents happen. But it will go down in history as like the closest tour that has ever existed. So I think that's also just part of the legend that the tour is.
Yeah. All right. What a Tour de France we have witnessed already.
I don't think I'll wrap up the episode there. That's a wrap for today's Domestique Cycling Podcast. A big thank you to our audience for tuning in. If you enjoyed the episode, please consider supporting us on Ko-Fi or Twitter. And if you're on YouTube, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We appreciate your support and look forward to seeing you next time. Au revoir.
Au revoir.
I've got the spores, the sickness. There's the twins in my brain.